In this real side experience, I would encounter a group of individuals I used to once know, as my association with them was through a spiritual path I once was affiliated with. At this moment, the only idea in the simulator that actually references the true reality, the isness life is, would be the new presentation which Duane has created. And although, like any idea, it can only be a reference, it cannot be the reality of that which it pertains to. The new presentation references that which is aside from the literal, simulated consciousness matrix, the real universes, whereas all other ideas, the various spiritual paths, the religions, etc., as they don't make mention of the ears, or that of the real purpose, that of recognizing and standing with the true reality as the real beings of light we actually are, through the utilizing of everything creational as a comparison, then really all these various paths provide nothing other than to remain embroiled in creation. For as sincere as some of these individuals may be, although practically everything creational is a dark force reptilian infected and represents then restriction, control, and taplining, and so any sincerity on their part is somewhat coupled with an awareness as to the reptilian control that is very much infused with all the paths, teachings, and practices, then these individuals are only promoting that which is keeping all who agree creationally bound. For even if the ideas created were not dark force infected, any created idea, if agreed with, if incorporated into the consciousness therefore, are causes that yield the effects that must be experienced. And although this is the design of creation, that of generating experience for our comparison of and recognition of the ears references, without the additional references that point to the real ears recognition purpose, then the essential part of the equation is absent, and all we are doing, as we agree with the various and endless created ideas out there, the spiritual paths, the religions, the authority figures, the gurus and masters, is remaining the constant effects of all these ideas, and we keep recycling in creation accordingly, until we do decide to detach from agreement with our consciousness of idea agreements and recognize the true reality, and then, regardless of how our consciousness is constructed, it is a consciousness we no longer are resigned to be the effects of. And so, like everybody, I have dabbled in and involved myself with various paths. All these would then be agreement ideas I placed in my consciousness, with all the various individuals involved. And although consciously individuals may move on to other ideas, chase other created pursuits, generally they don't release these agreements. They simply file them in the consciousness. These ideas become subconscious over time and lifetimes, and the individuals build constantly upon a consciousness they maintain complete agreement with, of all the ideas it contains. For a personal self-immersed individual will be in a complete agreement with the consciousness, which will be then everything that makes up its construction. All the spiritual paths, religions, and affiliations they thought they had moved on from, but are in fact like constant open files on their computer, and they potentially then are open to experience the effects of everything the consciousness comprises of. And this will express however it might in future lifetimes, as they find themselves in situations that are by their own design in actuality, as we always decide the construction of our consciousness. And so the process of awareness does involve the gradual facing and releasing of all these ideas of the consciousness, the agreements and emotional attachments. And very often, as we do this, we will have the experiences, scenes and situations that we were experiencing during the time, lifetime, positions in creation that we were originally deciding and agreeing on these ideas and securing the tap lines. And so many times in real side experiences, I will encounter scenes and individuals affiliated with the various spiritual paths and practices I pursued, not just of this lifetime, but lifetimes prior, as I go about my facing of the consciousness and taplining releasing. And of course, as we release our agreements and attachments, the individuals we had association with through all that we were involved with may still hold attachment with us, or they may try to bring us back into the created spiritual idea they represent, and again may be sincere of motive, as they may genuinely think their spiritual practice is beneficial. Because yes, we are the deciders. Our experience always reflects the choices we make, the ideas we agree with, the individuals we have attachments and agreements with. But even as we do become then indifferent to the consciousness, as we release agreement from it overall, our consciousness is still a part of every consciousness that affects overall the simulator arena, like a giant multiplayer shared computer game. And so, regardless of our agreement detachment from the consciousness, our consciousness is still a part of the overall consciousness that affects this shared arena. So potentially any individual whose consciousness is a part of this simulator can enter the creational simulated experience of any other throughout the dimensional life levels. And although the physical level presents decided to limitations of distance and time that can vary our extent of being accessible to others, the real side is only as limited as it is decided, and as we might operate on the consciousness creational simulated real side, so can these individuals at any moment potentially enter our experience, unless we are being provided or experiencing simulated experience aside from the overall consciousness affected simulator arena. On this occasion, these individuals from this particular spiritual path I was once affiliated with would approach me and seemingly present me with an opportunity or other, and at that moment I wasn't happening to be standing in the nowness of my real awareness, and so the determining of intent through the real awareness, that animating through all consciousness as it is, and so can read all ideas through it, including intent, this discernment was absent, and curious, I would accompany these individuals with only my personal self to determine what was taking place based on the visuals alone, as only from the surface simulation of any experience can the personal self draw its conclusions, if we happen to not be standing in the nowness of our real awareness, and the impressions it would provide in addition to what was visually transpiring be then unavailable. These individuals would lead me through a door, opening it with a golden key. Then we all would proceed inside. When we agree with individuals, when we open up to them, we are agreeing with their consciousness of ideas, their intent. We are effectively agreeing to experience the effects of the ideas this complete consciousness package comprises of. And if an individual has a particular consciousness which is inclined toward being abrasive, and if they have certain skills or abilities that they have developed we rather are deciding to potentially experience this as we agree with them, and they will generally behave and conduct themselves according to their consciousness design. And especially when we happen to be, for whatever reason, personal self-immersed, are we rather at the mercy of individuals we may open ourselves up to and their abilities, as without the real awareness connection and standing we have only what the personal self has skill-wise, that it has gleaned this lifetime around by way of protection. And these seemingly benign individuals on the surface, with their curious offer, would as though freeze me in place and begin to manipulate my consciousness in rather an abrasive and unbeneficial way, which was hard to describe, but the closest I can explain it as was an attempted rewiring of my consciousness, that these individuals were indeed revealing their true inclination, agenda, and ill intent, or were motivated by the dark forces or the influence to do so. I'm uncertain what would have come from this, had I not then returned myself to the nowness of my real awareness position, that despite the situations we may find ourselves in, that we have agreed to, removing ourself from the consciousness personal self is an automatic voiding of all ideas through it, including agreements, that in essence we have stepped aside from the continued effecting and experiencing of, and regardless of what agreements in the consciousness have allowed our adverse situations to take place, as they may also be agreements we still are to face and release, agreements that as we step into the consciousness can we be always potentially presented with situations of abrasiveness, or the imposition of individuals we have these subconscious agreements with that allow such to occur. A stepping aside from the consciousness nullifies all these agreements, and any individual who does have power over us and can exact it through the agreement permissions, yet to be personal self-addressed and released, no longer can do so, as the real awareness now is unshackled to afford whatever means is necessary for the personal self's protection or for extraction from the situation. Unshackled in that the personal self is not hamstringing the real awareness and its abilities through conflicting idea agreements in the consciousness that are permitting such situations. As we move from the personal self by ceasing the activation of the thoughts, the emotions of it that retain us in it and resigned to whatever restrictions of the unaddressed tap lines still remain with the consciousness, to the nowness of our real awareness position, aside from the consciousness where these situations can be dealt with and individuals handled. And so it was that whatever was attempted here with the alterations of my consciousness was stopped, rectified. I was released from my curious, frozen state, and I was extracted from this experience. Interestingly, these individuals not only had the ability to alter my consciousness, but to almost as though show me scenes from it, past lifetimes, etc., where I had operated in unsavoury ways. For yes, we all have had these various lifetimes where we have played many roles, have been the abusers and controllers as much as the abused and the controlled, and it seemed this was an effort on their part to attempt to elicit emotional reaction along the lines of guilt, shame, etc. That would, of course, have kept me in my personal self, unable to move into the nowness of the real awareness, where extraction was possible, as though they realized I would do this, would step into my real awareness, and so were trying to prevent me from thwarting their ill-intended efforts. I've experienced this before with other abrasive beings who have had similar creational and manipulating skills and talents, as though this is a tactic commonly employed by those with such ability, to hold individuals to their personal selves and render them vulnerable therefore. And yes, this was effective to an extent, perhaps holding me then longer than I otherwise would have remained personal self-immersed. But ultimately, as we face all these agreements, attachments, and past life misdemeanors, we become more so adept at standing indifferent to what is revealed, or at least more quickly do we cease our personal self-reactions of guilt, shame, fear, which are, as all emotion through the astral body is, as created and simulated as anything else we activate through the 5 bodies. So rather a good lesson again to always maintain the real awareness, nowness position, as not only can we then handle all situations that befall the personal self as we utilize it on the creational, simulated real side, but we also can determine the intent of all individuals in our midst, which would have had this situation avoided. But then it was a situation that could just as easily be resolved, as despite the errors and misjudgments we make, always we have the real awareness to lean to and stand in, and whatever we have decided and agreed to one moment we can retract from the next, withdraw agreement from. We are never resigned to what we have created for ourselves, unless we decide to cling to the ideas, to maintain agreement to the ideas that have affected our situations.
Yeah, we constantly go through it here, and it's okay. We just simply look at it, and we get mixed up in things. I'm in so-called deals all the time, and conversing with people, and you just have to take the risk to see where it leads. Sometimes you can't figure it out all the time. There are many unknowns, and so you give people the chance, and you see what they'll do. The real guys do the same thing. They give people the chance to step up and do something. Yeah, it's terrific, Kevin. Your experiences, etc. So we're all going through it. So you just keep going through it. You just keep focusing until you can figure out and recognize the is more so and more so and more so, because it just keeps going. And what we have to deal with here, well, it's whatever. It's a big mishmash. Sometimes it looks good, but it's whatever. So we're here to help people figure it out.